I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is how to deal with perfectionism. So I consider myself to be a perfectionist in recovery. I definitely succumbed to the trap of perfectionism when I was younger, and I am no longer a perfectionist today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the realizations that I had in my own personal life that helped me move from point A to point B, because this is something that I see people struggle with every single week. Perfectionism is exhausting, debilitating, and painful. While we can't dispense with it entirely, as there are some instances in which perfectionism is called for, computer programming, brain surgery, it is generally not an appropriate mode for human action. Rather, we kind of want to be satisficing the vast majority of the time and optimizing only when necessary. Actually, one helpful intervention is just to imagine that there is like a switch in your mind that you can access in order to intentionally toggle between these two states. Like you can create that switch, and that should allow you to begin to have some measure of control over the problem. So let's talk about my personal journey to overcome perfectionism. The first company I founded was a private tutoring company. It was really just me, but I gave it a name, and I worked with many different students on a variety of subjects across New York City. The motto of my company was excellence in all things. And it was my personal goal to show my commitment to excellence in every little thing that I did, no matter how small or insignificant. In fact, the smaller the detail, the greater the opportunity to demonstrate my commitment. Now, this is going to sound very silly now, but one way that I thought to show my commitment to excellence at the time was through my invoicing. Every month, I would go to the stationery store and buy this fancy parchment, and I would handwrite all of my invoices with a pen and an inkwell before I would deliver them to my clients in order to get paid. I thought that helped to impart the upscale, boutique, personal vibe that I was going for. Now, writing these invoices was expensive and it was time-consuming, but at least to my mind, it showed my commitment to what I believed in. Now, I did that and many, many other things for a while before I started to realize a few things about my perfectionism. In the first place, I increasingly understood that my motto was a lie. I certainly was not excellent in all things. In fact, I might only have been decent in a few things at best and rather unremarkable in the vast majority of things. Like I couldn't fix a toaster or speak Arabic or ride a unicycle or hit a target with a bow at 100 yards or cook a souffle or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I was being honest, I could really only do one or two things better than most people. And yet, I was able to maintain this illusion about excellence in all things for quite some time. How was that possible? When I examined this question, I realized that it was possible because I sort of minimized the value of all those other things I wasn't good at. Like those things were beneath me, or they didn't really matter, or they weren't truly important. And I would form negative judgments about the people who did excel in those fields. They were just dumb jocks or superficial idiots, etc. And this was all in the service of protecting my rather fragile view of reality. Like, I could be excellent in all things as long as most things didn't matter. So they kind of didn't count, right? And I've seen the same thing in nearly every case of perfectionism that I've worked with. It requires a very selective attention to maintain. To prop up the illusion, perfectionists kind of have to willfully not look at all the things they can't do very well. And this is made easier through the denigration and criticism of those things. After all, if they truly were important and meaningful, and perfectionists weren't perfect at them, then what kind of cognitive dissonance do you think that would create? So that was the first crack in the facade of my perfectionism. Now, before I go any further, if you're liking what you're hearing, please consider sending this episode to someone who might benefit from its message, because it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow. I'm also proud to announce that my book, The Value of Others, is now available for pre-sale on Amazon. I'm also writing original content for my free newsletter every week. If you'd like to sign up, you can do so on my website. Finally, please fill out an inquiry form on my website if you're interested in booking a paid consultation. Links to everything in the description. Let's get back to it. Now, the second crack in my perfectionism had to do with the realization that I was emotionally identified with the products of my perfectionism. In my mind, the invoice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a reflection of my core values and an extension of myself. And that, of course, is why I put so much time and attention into the invoicing, because I believed that other people would somehow be able to see me through that piece of paper. It would attest to my value and worth. And I think I did this because I was still a young man. At 20 years old, this was my first business, and I was absolutely still developing my personal and professional identities. And despite the fact that this was entirely appropriate, given my stage of life, I was also profoundly embarrassed by my own inexperience and incompetence. As such, I was overcompensating as a means of avoiding contact with those emotional experiences. On some level, I believed that I needed to provide my clients with even more value than they hired me to deliver in order to offset the liability associated with hiring me in the first place. So I felt the need to go above and beyond, often in respects that didn't really have to do with my job per se, in order to make up for the fact that I didn't feel exceptional at my actual job. These additional efforts were kind of a crutch to bolster my professional identity. Over time, however, this crutch became increasingly unnecessary. After thousands and thousands of hours, I got better at running a business, and I got better at working with students. I was able to see more and more that the invoice wasn't actually a reflection of myself. It was just a piece of paper, and a rather expensive and inconvenient piece of paper at that. And this was incredibly liberating. I talk about this a bit in my episode, How to Be Indestructible. We become vulnerable and exposed when we allow ourselves to identify with things that are not ourselves through narcissistic extension. It's a better idea to identify only with yourself and to make the surface area of your ego very small, as this will allow you to navigate life more peacefully and without unnecessary friction. And then one day, after years of this, I made the conscious decision not to provide my clients with handwritten invoices anymore. And I was actually pretty nervous about this decision. After training my clients to expect these invoices, I was worried that they would see my choice not to provide them as a downgrade in the quality of my services, that they would think that they are paying more for less. And you know what? It turned out that nobody cared. Like literally not a single client even mentioned anything about not receiving the invoices anymore. It turns out they just needed to know how much to make the checkout for. And that information could easily be communicated in other ways. Nobody cared. Nobody noticed. It was all in my head. Every month, I was spending a couple hours of my life creating these invoices. This was expensive, not only in terms of the stationery, but also in terms of the opportunity cost. I could be doing literally anything else with my life, including using that time to make more money to increase the value of those invoices. And this experience opened my eyes to the fact that different actions possess radically disproportionate values, and that it's the other person who decides ultimately what those values are. Remember, the cat decides what milk is good. All too often, we believe that we can kind of make that decision for the cat, and it doesn't work that way. However, through careful observation, you can get better at isolating the behaviors that are truly important to the cat, irrespective of your own opinions. You can then optimize those behaviors and satisfice the others. And this will allow you to become much more effective and much more efficient in delivering value, which in turn will allow you to deliver a lot more value to a lot more people, accelerating your growth both as a business person and as a human being. Hopefully that made sense. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your support and thank you for listening. And now, a word about Stellar. If you're interested in pursuing a master's degree or a doctorate, chances are good that you'll have to take the GRE. Now, before I became a psychologist, I was actually one of the world's top GRE test prep instructors. Over 20 years, I developed a unique and practical system for dismantling every aspect of this test, and I helped thousands of students achieve top percentile scores on the exam. Today, students can learn the same system I used to achieve my own perfect score with Stellar GRE, my online GRE self-study program. I personally wrote and designed every aspect of this course. Among other things, it includes a 500-page test prep manual, thousands of practice problems, and several full-length mock exams. Just like my episodes, Stellar is designed to give students the strategies and techniques they need to succeed as clearly and succinctly as possible. And the best part is, Stellar works. My students' average score improvements are higher than my competitors' score guarantees. So create an account and start your free trial today at stellargre.com. Use the code PSYCH for 10% off any membership plan. The link is in the description.